Uh-oh. Sounds like somebody's got a case of the Mondays.
You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove. For all the latest Buckeyes news, analysis, reaction, and the best Ohio State community on the entire internet, head over to buckeyegrove.com or follow us on Twitter at Ohio State Rivals. Without any further delay, it's time to get unscripted. Broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Ma! We get some meatloaf!
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Ma! The meatloaf!
Good Monday. Welcome back to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast. It was a near miraculous comeback for Ohio State and an epileptic seizure that was a crazy roller coaster ride for the Buckeyes. And I am hoping that this podcast will be a little less chaotic as we try to analyze and make sense what that Wisconsin-Ohio State game was on Sunday. I am your host, Kyle Lamb. We are brought to you by BuckeyeGrove.com and also our new show sponsor, JFQ Lending. All of your home purchase and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye, licensed in 33 states, and more waiting. You'll also never pay for your appraisal with these guys. So email info@jfqlending.com or visit them at jfqlending.com. So let's talk about this Ohio State basketball game because we've got a lot of angles to this that I want to go over. I want to cover the game itself, the ongoing absence of Caleb Wesson, which, by the way, I believe will come to an end here this week. I believe he will be ready. We know now Ohio State's opponent in the first round of the Big Ten tournament. They will be playing in the first round, technically second round. They'll be playing in the second round of the Big Ten tournament on Thursday in Chicago against Indiana, and that will be a 12:30 Eastern tip on ESPN. I'm sorry, I believe that's the Big Ten Network. Maybe it's ESPN. You'll have to check your local listings because I had that written down earlier and I can't find it. But it is at 12:30 Eastern time. I know that, and they are playing Indiana with the winner playing Michigan State in the quarterfinal on Friday. So we have that to talk about as well. As I said, the ongoing absence of Caleb Wesson. I do believe he will be back according to some sources. I believe he will be playing on Thursday. We'll get into his absence and what it means for Ohio State. And beyond that, also, Ohio State had a big man on campus this weekend taking in the game. Ibrahima Diallo was visiting officially, and he will be leaving this morning, Monday morning. He'll be finishing up his visit. I believe there may be an offer and possibly even a commitment coming off of that offer. We will see. But that is something I will talk about in the show as well. So, Ohio State, let's start at the top. Came back from a crazy number down. Joey Lane said after the game and senior day festivities, they came back from 75 down. I don't think it was 75, Joey, but I do know that they came back from being down as many as 23 in the second half. And they were actually down, I think, more impressive than coming back to force overtime down from 23 is the fact that they came down from 22. Remember, they made the first run and took it from 23 to I think it was a 15-point game. And then after going back and forth for a few minutes, remember, Wisconsin made another run to get it back to, I think, 22. And then Ohio State actually got it from 22 with like 7 or 8 minutes left, or maybe 10 minutes left. They got it all the way back down. They finished regulation on a 17-1 run to force overtime. And look, to me, this game was lost with that last regulation possession because Ohio State had the ball back after a turnover. They had the ball back with 29 seconds left. Remember, Ethan Happ got called for a moving screen. It was a great call, by the way, because he was set with his feet, but he kind of lunged with his right shoulder into C.J. Jackson's chest. If Ethan Happ just stands there and lets Jackson come to him, that was a perfectly legal screen. But because he lunged that shoulder in, that was an easy call on him. Ohio State gets the ball back with 29 seconds. Eventually, after they call timeout and they start burning clock, C.J. Jackson starts to go, and then Wisconsin fouls him, and it resets to like 6 seconds. And then, and that's when Ohio State, then Jackson basically made one dribble, got the defender off balance, and pulled up with that 3-pointer and missed it. And of course, Wisconsin got one more lunge at the basket, and Ohio State actually wound up getting a prayer to end regulation, but it did not go in. I thought that game was actually lost. And I know it's crazy I'm even making this comment in a game where Ohio State was down 23 points. But I thought the game was actually lost there. At least at that moment in time, it was lost because of C.J. Jackson's shot selection in that moment. I think Ohio State was doing such a great job down the stretch in this game, getting dribble penetration and getting to the rim. And they had Wisconsin on their heels, the last 10 minutes of that second half. And some of it was because Ohio State's full court pressure. They really had Wisconsin out of sync offensively. And Ohio State was getting a lot of points on offense because of their defense, because of some live ball turnovers, because of some bad shots by Wisconsin, because they were out of rhythm. So, Ohio State's offense was in some part because of the defense, but still they were getting to the rim. They were being aggressive. They were getting some good looks. They had a rhythm about them. And I just felt like C.J. Jackson settled to try to be a hero on that shot when, look, I'm not saying he shouldn't go to the rim and get a layup out of it, but I'm just saying force the defense to defend you in that situation. Don't pull up with 4 or 5 seconds left in the game and take a 3 on a pull-up. That's not his shot. And unfortunately, he's made some crazy shots this year, and it feels like when the degree of difficulty is higher, he's a better shooter. So from that standpoint, yeah, you kind of expected him to pull up and make that shot just because that's what he does. But it's still, in that moment, it was not a good situation. They went on to overtime. They played hard, but in overtime, it just felt like, I think Ohio State used up so much energy in that comeback. They just really were not able to make the shots in overtime. It just felt like they had tired legs. You saw it with Keyshawn Woods. He airballed a couple. C.J. Jackson airballed one. They were off. They spent too much energy in the comeback to make it happen. It's not that they couldn't have won in overtime, but I felt like that's why it was so important for C.J. Jackson to make a better decision there at the end of regulation. So that, the combination of I think having tired legs in overtime and, maybe that decision when they were down 2 to not foul Ethan Happ. It wasn't a decision not to foul Ethan Happ. Justin Ahrens actually tried to foul, but he missed. And then the ball got sent over into the corner to Brad Davison. Ohio State actually trapped him trying to get a turnover forced out of that. And they missed and got called for a foul, and it got sent back to 4 points after both free throws were made. And essentially the game was over at that point. So, look, Ohio State had their chances in this one. Certainly, they probably could have won if you don't fall down by 23. And some of that is, again, to bad offense. And some of the bad offense comes from the fact that Caleb Wesson missed his 3rd game. That's now 125 minutes that Ohio State has played since Caleb Wesson's suspension has been in effect. And that is 125 minutes they have not led, not a single second. They have not led in the past 3 games in 125 minutes. To me, that just underscores 2 things. Number one, it shows, yes, Ohio State definitely has an issue right now offensively. But, this is not... I know people are fretting about this roster as it's currently composed, but I guarantee you the future is very, very bright, not just because of the guys coming in, but look, Justin Ahrens is turning into a heck of a player. He's become, I think, a lot better than anybody expected in year 1. You saw in the first half there were signs when Ohio State was not getting anything done offense. The only bright spot that they had was Dwayne Washington. He has the talent. He just needs to be more consistent defensively, and he'll learn shot selection and better decision-making. That'll come. But he presses. Ohio State needs a leader, and he knows it. He presses. So you're going to see more from Washington. You're going to see more from Orange. You're going to see more from Luther Muhammad. You add in then Caleb Wesson next year, and look, this Ohio State offense will get better. They're going to have 2 facilitators. They're going to have DJ Carton and CJ Walker both taking the reins at point guard next year. So you're going to have the distributor slash easing presence at point guard. Ohio State will have that covered. They're going to have the scorers. The depth will be there. The rebounding will be there with E.J. Liddell and Alonzo Gaffney and Kyle Young. Ohio State has everything that they need next year. Interestingly enough, this is going to lead to another conversation I'll have later in recruiting, because I know there's some speculation about Ben Roderick of Olentangy Liberty. Should Ohio State offer Ben Roderick? I say no, and I'll get into that later. And it looks like that they're going to offer Diallo, and there's kind of a two-part to this discussion, which I will talk about later. But the second thing that this game underscores is how important Caleb Wesson really is. Look, there were actually some people as recently as a few weeks ago saying Ohio State should bench Caleb Wesson, or he's overrated, or he's just not playing very well, or he's not very important. And I mean, look, if you had that opinion before, and I thought it was crazy then, it really looks foolish now. I'm not trying to pick on anybody. I'm not trying to call you out. But these last 3 games just proves how important Caleb Wesson is to this Ohio State basketball team. And I'm not saying Caleb Wesson is an All-American and that he's one of the best players in the country and that he's as good as Zion Williamson, and we should compare his absence to Zion Williamson's absence with Duke, because Duke has fallen off the rails too. But remember, there were people saying when Zion Williamson went down, well, no big deal. Duke is really, really good. They have all this talent, all these All-Americans. And we've seen Duke since Zion Williamson has been out, and Duke is not very good either. And it just goes to show talent is only part of the equation. And I'm not saying this means there's a lack of talent. I'm saying it means you need talent, you need decision-making, you need experience, you need leadership, you need scorers, you need balance. There are a lot of things that go into this. Winning basketball games is not just about throwing the 5 most talented guys out there and expecting them to be a cohesive unit. Sometimes you need a facilitator or a go-to guy that makes everybody else better. For Ohio State, that was Caleb Wesson. For Duke, that happened to be Zion Williamson. That doesn't mean the two are on the same, latitude, let alone the same planet. They're not even on the same planet in terms of talent. Zion Williamson is a crazy talent. But I'm just saying, for Ohio State, Caleb Wesson made that offense. And yes, I know that offense had problems even when Caleb was in there. But Caleb Wesson was the anchor to this offense for Ohio State. Everything runs through him. Every shot that they were getting when he was on the floor was because they were playing inside out. Teams were doubling him. Teams were trying to take him out of the offense. And it was allowing Ohio State to have inside-out passing and getting shots for other guys, whether it was Dwayne Washington or Justin Ahrens or Luther Muhammad or Musa Jallow, who, by the way, played a great game against Wisconsin. Check out his stat line overall. He played a really good game. He played great defensively. He rebounded, had some assists. I thought that was one of his better all-around games this season. He's still got to finish this. He's got to work on the scoring. He's got to be a better shooter. That stuff can still come. But he can be a good role player, just like Andre Wesson. I know there's a lot of criticism of Andre Wesson, who played a bad game against Wisconsin. And I know people will say, well, he's not a Big Ten talent. And I'm sorry, Andre Wesson is a Big Ten talent. The problem with Andre Wesson is he's a guy that would be a great role player for a team like Ohio State. But because Ohio State is lacking experienced scorers right now, he's forced into a starting role and forced into making more plays and taking more shots than he's capable. He's having to play beyond his limitations, and that's not his fault. He's in a position right now where he has to do more for Ohio State than he really should. He's a Big Ten player, but he's a Big Ten role player, and he should be a guy that's coming off the bench as a 6th, 7th, 8th guy for Ohio State. That would be a great popular role player if he were in a better spot, a better position, and on a slightly more talented team. But that's not his fault. But next year, he will be able to move into, even if he's starting, he'll be able to move into a role that is less reliant on him scoring. And, so Ohio State is in a position where it needs Caleb Wesson to step up and needs to be him, on the roster. And without him right now, they have no true backup center. Remember, Micah Potter would have been the backup center, but he wanted to be a 4. He transferred out. And so now Ohio State is in a position that they need him on the floor. They just don't have a true backup. This kind of reminds me, look, I don't like to call other sites out. I don't like to call other writers out. I'm not going to do this by name. But there was an opinion editorial Sunday criticizing Chris Holtmann for suspending Caleb Wesson, basically saying that they torpedoed the season, to suspend Caleb Wesson. And look, I should not even validate it by mentioning it, but this is a really bad take. Let's just pretend for a second this was Chris Holtmann's decision to suspend Caleb. It was not, by the way. I'll get into that in a second, but it was absolutely was not. But let's pretend for a second that Chris Holtmann made this decision. In what world are we living in? Are we going to blame a coach for imposing standards and discipline on their players? Look, I understand frustration. Sometimes I think there is a pressure from the public to maybe suspend athletes for things that could be handled by the court system and don't necessarily need extra punishment on top of that. I don't think we have to suspend every single player for every single off-field or off-court transgression. I've never believed that needs to be done. Sometimes, just let the law handle it. They make a mistake. Hopefully they'll learn from it. Repeated violations, repeated troubles, I think you got to eventually nip in the bud to set an example. But I don't think we have to punish everybody. But even if that were the case, I can't believe we're sitting here and we're gonna write articles and blogs or stories criticizing a coach for punishing a player for something that he did. I'm just amazed that kind of thing exists. But here's the truth. The cold hard reality is Caleb Wesson was not suspended by Chris Holtmann, and Chris Holtmann said that publicly in his press conference on March 1st. You go back and listen. Chris Holtmann himself stated that this was a violation of athletic department policy, and this was a suspension that was triggered automatically by Ohio State's code of conduct. Okay, this was an automatic suspension. Now, look, I'm not going to call this. Ohio State is treating the suspension very gingerly. They, to their credit, are not disclosing exactly what happened. I've heard what happened, or at least I've heard takes on what is believed to have happened. I'm not going to repeat them for a number of reasons. Number one, I was asked not to, but number two, look, I can't confirm with 100% accuracy what happened. But I will tell you, putting the details together, if you read through the student-athlete handbook, the code of conduct, you can kind of get a sense, based on what Ohio State has said publicly, you can get a really good idea, especially if you have some background information, and maybe some of you don't, and that's okay. I'm not going to get into that either, but if you have some background information, you can put two and two together what may have happened here, okay? And just going by what Ohio State said, remember in the original release, they said he is suspended indefinitely. He's expected back before the end of the season. Okay, so you can put two and two together. They know he would miss a finite number of games despite the fact he was suspended indefinitely. And it's always funny how teams do this. All teams do this. It's so hilarious. They call it an indefinite suspension, but you always see them in these situations miss the same number of games. It's usually 1, 2, or 3 games, and then they're back. These indefinite suspensions are kind of hilarious how they're termed. But if you read through the handbook, if you look closely, you can kind of put two and two together. And I will tell you, the suspension was announced March 1st. It probably took effect a day or two before that because usually it's retroactive. It's not the day it's announced. It's usually the day the violation either occurred or the day after the last competition that the athlete took place in. So I will tell you this. If it is in fact like the handbook suggests, there are certain violations in there that would be a 2-week suspension. In this case, let's say Caleb Wesson is serving a 2-week suspension. If it took effect February 27th or 28th, then he would be back on Thursday for the game against Indiana. And I will tell you this, if that is the case, which I'm hearing that he is expected back for the game against Indiana, that'll be interesting because this is an Indiana team that is very, very, I shouldn't say very, very good. They're playing very well right now. since Ohio State beat them in Bloomington, they've really turned their season around. They've got wins against Michigan State and Wisconsin. They won at Illinois, and then they won against Rutgers on Senior Day on Saturday. So this Indiana team has turned things around, and Ohio State-Indiana is an interesting matchup. I have a sharp friend, a big Vegas guy who does very well, by the way. I'm not going to toot his horn. He doesn't like exposure, but I will say he's very, very good at what he does. And, he told me that if Caleb Wesson plays, it's expected Ohio State will be a 1 or 2 point favorite against the Hoosiers, most likely. If he does not go, Indiana will probably be a favorite. And I'm telling you what, based on the way Ohio State has played offense in these last 3 games without him, if he does not play, it could be a long, rough day for Ohio State. But it is believed that Caleb Wesson will go against Indiana. And if he does, Ohio State will actually most likely be a small favorite in Vegas. Now, I will add on this because I'm going to tell you up front, I think if Ohio State wins on Thursday, I think the Buckeyes are in the NCAA tournament. And I'm going to take that to I want you to quote me on this, and I don't mind going out on a limb and say this. And I hate to say anything with 100% because you just never know what a room of 10 people, you know from football, you get a group of people into a room making a decision collectively. You just never know how it's going to turn out. So we know this from football. There's a history here. You just can never predict 100% what's going to happen. But I think the winner of Ohio State-Indiana will be in the NCAA tournament, and I don't think they will even be in the first 4 in Dayton. I think the winner is in safely. I think the loser of this game could get in, but I tend to think this is a play-in game. I think the winner is in. I think the loser may find itself just outside of the NCAA tournament, the first 4. I think they'll find themselves off the bubble and out of the tournament on Selection Sunday. Bernard Muir, he is the athletic director at Stanford. He said an interesting thing during halftime of the Cincinnati-Houston game on Sunday on CBS. It's not really interesting if you follow this. This is well known that this is procedure, but he just reiterated something that has been long known. He said, he made it a point that they take, and he said this unsolicited. He said that they really strongly will look at absence from players and coaches by key players or key coaches in games this season, provided that these players or coaches will be available for the NCAA tournament. So as that applies to Ohio State, that means these last 3 games without Caleb Wesson will be taken into consideration by the committee, provided that Caleb Wesson will be playing in the NCAA tournament. So let's say Ohio State gets Caleb Wesson back for the Indiana game, and then they win. And then they lose to Michigan State. I think that will be enough for Ohio State to be in the NCAA tournament, not just because of the resume, but the ironic part about this is Ohio State sucking so badly the last 3 games without Caleb Wesson just reinforces how much better they are with him. So you can look, if you're Ohio State and he comes back for the Indiana game and then they beat Indiana, if you're Ohio State, you're mailing that committee, you're reminding that committee that, hey, this is what we are with Caleb Wesson in the lineup. The last 3 losses we had without him was because he's our best player and he did not play. And I think Ohio State has a strong case here. I think the committee will take that into consideration. So if Caleb Wesson plays on Thursday against Indiana, especially if Ohio State wins, absolutely Ohio State is going to be in the NCAA tournament. You can say those 3 losses were without their best player. He's back. They won a game with him in the Big Ten tournament. They'll be inside the bubble come Selection Sunday if he's back and they beat Indiana. Or even if he's not back, if they beat Indiana, I still think they'll be in the NCAA tournament, provided he plays against Michigan State or is going to be back for the NCAA tournament. Either way, in those scenarios, they're fine. Here is the only concern you have as an Ohio State fan. You played 3 games without him. You didn't play well in any of the 3. You didn't lead a single minute. You throw him out there on Thursday against a team that is playing really good basketball right now, and that's a concern because now you got to get used to playing with him again after the last 2 weeks of not playing with him. And I think that's where Ohio State is in a really tricky position because this might be the legitimate game. I know people have been saying this for the last 3 games, and I've been arguing about this and correcting them. But in my opinion, this might be the game that it might actually be the first true must-win Ohio State has had. I'm not saying that they can't get into the tournament without winning this on Thursday, but I think this is the situation, especially if Caleb is back on the team. I think this is the situation where Ohio State has to win to show the committee that those last 3 losses were because their best player did not play. Because then if he comes back and they still lose, it kind of destroys the credibility of losing your last 3. So I think that they have to win that game against Indiana. If they do, they're in the NCAA tournament. If they don't, well, I think it's going to be a first-round home game in the NIT. So pretty simple. I think that's what it comes down to. Ohio State, as I said, if Weston plays, it's looking like they'll be a 1 or 2 point favorite. If he does not play, they'll probably be a couple point underdog. If he doesn't play, I'm not going to say they can't beat Indiana without him, because they can, but it's not very likely. So I think they need him to be out there. They need him to be playing well, and then they need to pick up a win against Indiana. That will get them in the NCAA tournament. If they do beat Indiana, they will have Michigan State in the quarterfinal of the Big Ten tournament. I got to tell you, if Caleb is back, they beat Indiana, I actually kind of like their chances against Michigan State, and I'm going to tell you why. In the first game against Michigan State, he had a sensational game. Remember, it was like 26 points and 10 rebounds, I think, against Nick Ward in Michigan State, and Ohio State, fell apart in the last 5 minutes of the game. The second time, although he did not have a very good game against Nick Ward, remember Ward got hurt in the second half with that injury that now he's going to miss the rest of the season. So Michigan State will be without Nick Ward this time around. If Ohio State has Wesson, don't get me wrong, Michigan State has played well since Ward's injury. They have some other bigs that are capable. Xavier Tillman is a good inside-outside player, good defensive player, good length. But I think Ohio State, with Weston on the floor and Ward not playing, if they get to that quarterfinal game against the Spartans, I think that's a game Ohio State could actually pull the upset there. It'd be interesting because Ohio State would have a chance to beat Indiana, Michigan State without Ward. Then they could get another crack at the 4-seed Badgers in the Big Ten semifinal. There's a path there where Ohio State could get hot here in the tournament. But again, this is all dependent, I think, on getting Caleb Wesson back. If that does not matter, or if that does not happen, none of this probably matters. They're probably not in the NCAA tournament. But look, I'm not trying to get ahead of myself. I'm not trying to be an optimist here. Oh, Ohio State's going to win the Big Ten tournament. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if Caleb Wesson comes back, the way the bracket is set up, if they win that first game against Indiana, they've got some matchups that are slightly more favorable in the upper half of the bracket than, say, having to face Purdue or Michigan in the lower half. I think those were worse matchups for them in particular. I think Michigan State without Ward, Wisconsin, who Ohio State took to overtime even without Caleb Wesson, and an Indiana team that, granted, they're playing a lot better, but they're a lot like Ohio State in that they still have some offensive issues at times. I just think that the bracket broke out for Ohio State for potential advancement a little better than it looked like it would last week. We'll see what happens. Ohio State, 12:30 Thursday against Indiana in the second round of the Big Ten tournament, the 8-9 game. The winner will play Michigan State at 12:30 on Friday in the Big Ten tournament.
Stretch runtime here at Unscripted Ohio. Kick up your feet as we cross the finish line with the Buckeye Beat, the latest in Ohio State news and notes.
Kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy.
We are in the stretch run, of course, here of the Unscripted Ohio podcast. One thing I told you at the top I wanted to talk about that we have not yet. Ibrahima Diallo, 7-footer from Prolific Academy in California. He is a guy from Nigeria that moved to the United States a couple years ago. Big-time athletic talent, long arms, and I mean long. I mean, these claws, his wingspan, I think has been measured at 7'4", 7'5". I'm not positive on that, but he's got a long reach, very, very high upside, a guy that could blossom into an NBA lottery type of draft talent. I'm not saying he's going to get there. He's still very raw. He's more of a defensive rim protector right now that has some upside offensively. He has already visited Pittsburgh, and he visited Ohio State this weekend. He was actually, as of Monday morning, he was going to still be on campus and then leaving. That's my understanding, is he was leaving Monday morning. This was an official visit, and I do believe Ohio State, remember, in basketball for this next recruiting class, he is a 2019 kid. He's already visited Pittsburgh, interested in Ohio State. They have one scholarship open for him to take, and I know there are a lot of people that wanted Ben Roderick of Olentangy. There's been a lot of speculation. Would Ohio State offer him? They've been tracking him. He's putting up some great numbers this year as a senior. But here's the thing. Diallo is a guy that is a 7-footer. He's a true center. He's got a huge upside. I'm not sure what he will be for Ohio State. If he commits to Ohio State, if he gets an offer, which I think he's going to, it's my opinion that he will get an offer before he leaves. And I think I'm not guessing what he will do, or I guess I am guessing, but that's all it is I'm guessing what he will do. I think he would be inclined to take the offer and commit to Ohio State if it is given to him. And generally these official visits tend to end with an offer if you don't have one already. So I think Ohio State will likely give him one. I think there's a good chance that he would commit. If that happens, look, this is Ohio State basically saying, we have seen what happened to us when Caleb Wesson was not on the floor this year. We had very little size. We have no true backup. Because remember, Ohio State got caught with their pants down. And I don't say that, this is not Ohio State's fault, but they got caught with Micah Potter transferring right at the beginning of the year because he wanted to be a 4. He was their backup center, would have gotten some meaningful minutes, would have made, I think, some very valuable minutes to Ohio State this year. I think he looked a lot better offensively, looked more comfortable, looked stronger, looked quicker. I think he would have been a very, very good basketball player for the Buckeyes this year. I really do. But he transferred before the year, so Ohio State did not have a true backup center. With Caleb out of the lineup these last 3 games, they've had to rely on Kyle Young, who's been hurt, and Jaden Leday, he's a true freshman, and he's just not ready. He's especially not ready to be a post player. And I think that it reminded Ohio State that they needed some more size. And so I think that they realized this is a talented guy. He's available. We got to look into this. We got to do our background work, have him on campus, and maybe he is the best fit for Ohio State right now. I think that's the case. I don't know what's going to come of Leday. I know they're going to have a full complement of power forwards next year when you add in E.J. Liddell along with a healthy Kyle Young and Jaden Leday, if he does stick it out and stick around. And look, he's shown some flashes. He's a guy that's very talented. I thought he did a good job playing defense for Ohio State down the stretch. He just wasn't comfortable as a post player backing up Caleb, and he's still not comfortable with the shot. He can shoot it out to about 12 to 15 feet, but he's just not comfortable at this level, at the speed of the game right now. So Ohio State needed a backup center. Just bottom line, it was painfully obvious without Caleb in there. That's what they needed. So Diallo is a guy that's a potential rim protector and huge upside offensively. I don't know if he's going to reach it or not, but he has some instincts and feel for the game based on the highlights and the video clips I've seen. I'm impressed with what he can do. I know there are people saying, they're disappointed that this means they probably won't get Roderick. And if another spot does not open up, then there's no space for Roderick. If another spot does open up, even then, I'm not sure that they would take it. And here's why. Number one, Chris Holman is very big on balanced classes. Diallo, along with the other 3, that would make 4 guys incoming. I don't think that they want to give a 5th guy to this class. But the other part of it, too, is Roderick was a big need for this team and this roster. He's a guy that could have helped. Problem is, I don't think that there's as big of a need going forward. Because you look at this roster, next year you start at point guard. You've got DJ Carton and you've got CJ Walker. They're both facilitators. They're guys that can make things happen, take care of the ball, and get a team into the offense. You're going to have the second year of Justin Ahrens, the second year of Luther Muhammad, the second year of Dwayne Washington. These are all guys that at different times or another this season showed flashes of being a really good scorer for Ohio State. I like where Justin Ahrens is. I think he's got a future now. It wasn't real clear coming into the season if he would be a main cog or a contributor or a future go-to guy for Ohio State, but he is showing flashes of a guy that could be really good in the 4 years at Ohio State. But you add in those three guys with a true point guard, and then you throw in the athleticism and talent of Alonzo Gaffney, and then those three guys at the four that I mentioned, you add in Andre Wesson, who, as I said earlier, now all of a sudden Andre Wesson becomes a role player and not a scorer that has to score for Ohio State. You add in that, and you throw in a backup center for Caleb as a rim protector and just backup minutes as a freshman. All of a sudden, all of the components are coming together for Ohio State. Ben Roderick is a good high school basketball player that is a Division I talent and will go somewhere and play very well. He'll have a good career. And don't get me wrong, he's being recruited by Wisconsin. I can see it now. He is the type of guy that will go average 13 points a game at Wisconsin, and people say he got away. Well, yes and no. You got to remember, a place like Wisconsin is a good place for guys that can't break you down off the dribble because they run the swing. And it was mentioned today on the broadcast, on Sunday on the broadcast, Wisconsin has not been running as much swing with Ethan Happ in the lineup because he doesn't have the shooting presence. He doesn't have that outside ability to do anything outside the lane. So they couldn't run as much swing with him, but they're going to get back to the swing offense like they have in years past under Bo Ryan. And guys like Roderick are going to be really effective because they can shoot, and you can get him down, take advantage of size mismatches because he is 6'4" or 6'5". You can get him against a smaller point guard or a shooting guard, and he can post up and score on the block. So he's going to look like a fantastic addition for Wisconsin if that's where he ends up. But people have to remember, a guy like this, he's not, from what I've seen, and again, I have not seen him play in person, but I've seen a lot of clips on him. I don't feel, from what I've seen, he's a guy that's a big go-to scorer at this level for a team like Ohio State, because I don't think he can break you down off the dribble well enough at the next level. I just don't think he projects well in doing that. And I think that's why there's been some hesitancy in addition to numbers and roster. I think that's why Ohio State has not yet offered and probably won't get an offer. And I think if Diallo does get an offer and commits, that will probably rule out Ben Roderick going to Ohio State, which is kind of disappointing because I'm not saying he can't be a good player. He's got a great stroke. He can be a good scorer. I just don't think he has the quickness and athleticism to be an above-average Big Ten basketball player, at least for Ohio State in that kind of system. I think he'll be a good fit if he goes to Wisconsin or someplace like that. I just don't think it'll work at Ohio State. So anyhow, Ibrahimo Diallo finishing up his visit Monday at Ohio State. I'm expecting he'll be offered, and if so, it wouldn't surprise me if a commitment came to Ohio State in the future. We will see how that goes. Maybe if that doesn't work out, then they go back to Roderick and they kick the tires on that and they offer him a scholarship, to which I think he would say yes, but we will see. But I just think Ohio State's roster is in a place right now. It needs a big man. We've seen 3 games without Caleb Wesson were really, really tough to watch. And I think that's because Kyle Young in certain situations is a great small 5. You can take advantage of matchups and size in some situations with him on the floor, but longer term, they need a true backup center. That they were definitely missing that down the stretch. The loss of Potter before the season really hurt them. Will Diallo be that guy? Will he be the rim protector that helps them make a deep run in the NCAA tournament next year and have a great Big Ten season? To be determined. That script is unwritten. But we will find out. This is Unscripted Ohio, and that script is coming to a close now as we wrap the show up. Reminder, we'll be back on Wednesday. Corey and Johnny will be at you with the Scarlet and Great podcast, and I will be back Friday to recap the first day of the Big Ten tournament for Ohio State, and hopefully, for Ohio State's sake, preview the second day of the Big Ten tournament. Remember, you can hear us every Monday and Friday on BuckeyeGrove.com. We are brought to you by jfqlending.com. You can check them out at jfqlending.com. You can also catch the show every Monday and Friday on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. Catch me on Twitter at KYLam8. That is going to wrap it up for the show today. Again, Listen to Corey and Johnny on Wednesday, and I'll be back at you on Friday. Have a great week, everybody.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.